Okay, I'll give you an intro and then we'll roll. All right.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Perfect. All right. Day two, everybody. Sorry, day three. Oh my gosh, it's all blurring together. Speaker number two, Global Youth Basketball Summit, proudly presented by Golden Ticket Sports. We are so fortunate to have Coach Brianna Finch with us today. In high demand, not only in this quarantine period, but also speaking all over the world, coaching all over the world, from professional leagues to the college leagues and everything in between. Talking about using a games approach to teach offensive concepts today and actions. Really looking forward to what Coach Finch has for us. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. I'm really looking forward to this session, and we will get underway with Coach Finch. The floor is yours.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Tanner and Chris and everybody involved. I'm really excited to speak and join, with all these great coaches and continue to learn and hopefully bring a little bit different perspective. As Tanner mentioned, I've kind of been lucky enough to coach. I've coached college in the U.S. for 17 years now. And then I've also coached at the youth level in Ireland and then at the professional level in Denmark in 2014. And so I have a little bit of a unique perspective, and I'm familiar with the club system and how that compares to the U.S. and the college system. And I'm really excited to kind of share what I've learned and also bring this topic today. I hopefully will leave time at the end for questions, but if I don't, all of my contact information will be up. I love to share. I love to talk. So please feel free to reach out to me. But with this topic today, I'm going to take a little bit different approach. I want to take a little bit more of a theoretical approach at the beginning and kind of scale it back on what it really means to use a game-based approach. I think a lot of times we say game-based, and so we small-sided games and advantage games and things like that, and we put players in 3-on-3, and okay, it's going to be a better transfer, it's going to be more fun, and hopefully it is, and hopefully that does occur. But one of my goals over these last couple months has been really to dive deeper into what it means and what the theory is behind it, and how do we apply it as a coach, as a wholeness, and holistically for our players. And then toward the end, toward the middle, toward the end, I want to then work toward how do we use it and apply it as coaches with, a more realistic approach, and using what games and what concepts and skill development. So then just kind of beginning, I think as coaches, it's really important for us to, especially at the youth level, we're trying to introduce the sport and keep them excited about it and coming back. I know a lot of coaches have talked about the more sports they play, the more things they do, the better off they're going to be in the long run. So as coaches, it's really important for us to focus on creating an environment where they're going to be motivated, they're going to be engaged with us as coaches, with each other, and where they're going to start to find that sense of joy and self-motivation. We always talk about intrinsic motivation, where they're going to develop that at the beginning, right? And it's the environment that we're creating, both physically on the court and then emotionally, and with our relationships, is going to be really important at that early age and at the young age for players. So, and again, this is kind of what is that learning environment going to look like, and what do we want it to look like? And so this is actually a slide I used when I polled about 15 of my former international players and kind of asked them the difference between a club system in Europe and internationally versus kind of the college and youth development system in the US. And so I think one of the biggest things is, are we creating an environment where we want immediate results, or are we're creating an environment that is going to give long-term results? And if we want immediate results, well then, at a young age, you're probably telling the players exactly where to go and what to do, and moving them around like chess pieces, because that's gonna get you the most points and the most baskets, and then you can win a game and everybody's happy because you won the game, but the players aren't learning. And so for a long-term result and for their development, we want to be able to incorporate the tactical component and along with the technical and the skill development. And so that's really important, but it's going to take longer, and we have to be more patient, and we have to, teach in a little bit different style versus immediate results. And then also, with the games based, like the feedback becomes very, very, very important. Again, as a coach, we're trying to create an atmosphere, but we also want to encourage learning, and we want to be aware of what kind of feedback we give to the athletes and the young kids, and how we give it and when we give it. As a coach personally, I am extremely aware of my feedback. When I first started coaching, I talked all the time on the court. I talked way too much. And over the years and through my learning and reading and research and talking with other coaches, like I give very little feedback now. I'm probably eerily quiet on the court sometimes, because again, my job is to put the players in a position where they can learn and they can grow and they can adapt, and be able to make adjustments on their own. And I try to be very concise and with my feedback, and small cues here and there, and cue words that will really help them. And then the other thing is, especially I will talk about being here in the US, like we definitely have, as a whole, I think it's changing. I am very excited about this, but I do think it's changing. But as a whole, it's more. How are we got to grind. We got to more reps, more games, more practices, more training, more everything. And more is not always better. It's quality over quantity. And, I think that's something that I do believe other countries probably do a better job than the US, and understanding that. And we need to be aware of that, with, especially again, going back to our youth, like we don't want burnout at the age of 10. And so it's really important that we are aware when players, when we need to lighten things up, when we need to change the mood, when we need to go off script, and, take them out of a basketball environment and do something else for the day. But that's going to enhance, again, back to the long-term results. And then again, as a coach, we need to be aware of the individual development versus the team development. And that's going to vary, depending. I know there's coaches from all different ages, all different, countries listening in. And so, you just have to kind of examine what your goals are for your team or your youth, organizations and whatnot. And then I think the other, as I mentioned kind of previously, that goes along with, again, creating this game-based, more cohesive environment, is the interpersonal relationship with coaches. At the end of the day, you're still the mentor as the coach, and you're still kind of, I heard somebody call a CEO. And it's important to be able to have a relationship with your players, and they want to be able to talk with you, and they want to know that you care about them. And so I think that's, again, really, really important, because the more that, young kids and young players feel a sense of belonging and a sense of that they're cared about, the more likely they're going to continue to participate and come back to practice and, really enjoy the environment that they're in. So then, all that being said, why do we want to use a game-based approach? And that's kind of where I wanted to start this. Again, everybody is talking about small-sided games, 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 1-on-1, best pathway for development. And I agree. I definitely agree. But for me, I think I lost some of kind of what that meaning was, as far as, what does that mean? If I just put the players in a 3-on-3 game, are they going to get better? Maybe, but how does that work? And then, if I put them in a 3-on-2 advantage game, or, a 3-on-3 with a small advantage starting, what does that mean? And so I really wanted to take a deeper dive into that. And I don't have, a background or a PhD in anything with, research-based or sports psychology. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'll reference some of those today. But So I just started reading articles and talking to people who do have that background. And so the game-based approach, basically it's centered on the coach creating an environment that is supportive of questioning and open dialogue. So again, kind of what I just talked about. And then it has shown in research that it has a greater tactical learning than a traditional drill-based practice. So there is definitely research that has shown that players will gain a greater sense of tactical knowledge and tactical concepts that they can then apply, in a game more readily than just doing drills and then hoping that that transfers into a game. So again, what does it all mean? There's advantage games, there's constraint games, there's small-sided games. And, I think, again, they all get lumped into one thing. And so from here on, I want to kind of break it down for everybody, and then how do we apply it into offensive concepts. So I started with the constraints-led approach, because this is one that I tend to use a lot, is constraint games. And what does it mean? And in using it, I've learned, and I'm going to try to change my language with it, is to use it more of a manipulation games. But it's basically, the constraints-led approach is based on dynamical systems theory. So with this theory, basically the goal is for the athletes to self-organize. So our job as a coach is to create an environment that allows the players to self-organize and figure things out. And we use different constraints, which I'll talk about, to change maybe, and like I said, manipulate the environment so that the players figure it out. But with that being said, the goal is not for them to come to one outcome. It's not for us to constrain the environment so much that they come to the outcome that we want as a coach. It's for us to change the environment so that the athletes come to various outcomes at their own awareness and organization, if that makes sense. And again, within kind of this approach and this theory, and again, these are all based on educational theories originally. So for hundreds of years, it's been, or maybe not hundreds, 100 years or so, it's more been a framework for education. And so only in probably the last, I think I heard like 1975, 76 is when it kind of started being applied more to sports. And then even less so to team sports more recently. So there's still a lot of unknown with the application to team sports. But within, again, this approach is the practice structure and the feedback of the coach needs to also kind of align with this goal of allowing the players to self-organize. So if we put them in a constraint, a game or a manipulation game, and then we're constantly giving feedback, that's not really allowing them to self-organize. That's just constantly giving them feedback and filling them with, what ideas we want them to find and what end goals we want them to find. So again, you have to be able to understand that the structure we're creating with, whatever manipulations we make, we need to be aware that we probably want to limit our feedback if we're using this approach. And then I will say I heard, on a podcast, the Perception and Action podcast with Rob Gray, which is fantastic, by the way, I'll reference him again, that not all constraint learning and practice is done with this approach. So, there will be times in practice where you are doing, a different drill, or maybe you're doing like a non-game based drill, and you're giving more feedback, or it requires more feedback. And that's okay. Like, the entire practice doesn't have to be aligned with it. But if you're using a specific game or a specific drill with this approach, you kind of have to be aware of, what you want to get out of it. And so I heard this phrase used, and I thought it was really cool. It's coaches are basically environmental architects in this idea of a game-based approach, right? So we're trying to design these games and the tasks to constrain so that the players, and it says offer immediate feedback and affordances, but that's feedback for the players. So that's the players' internal feedback. It's not us giving external feedback as a coach. So again, and this was originally, again, the idea of the CLA was originally used as a more for individual skill development and manipulation. So again, it hasn't been applied to teams quite as much, but we are trying to create that environment where players can self-organize and create their own feedback internally and within each other. So again, just kind of going into that. And if we have to step in and explicitly instruct a lot, then we probably haven't created the environment that we were initially trying to create. And so as a coach, then you need to take a step back and kind of be like, okay, how can I change the environment so that I'm not having to explicitly step in and instruct? I need to, maybe I need to change this, or, maybe we need to, tweak the number of players so that, there's more feedback within them, or maybe we need to make it less players so that there's more space and they can kind of figure things out and there's more time. And so then they can have their own internal feedback and their own internal learning happening. And again, it's just, we want to offer our athletes the experience to kind of learn and adapt and self-organize based on this. And so again, here's kind of a really, again, this is from the Rob Gray with the Perception and Action podcast, but it's kind of the whole constraint-led approach to coaching in a nutshell. So again, our goal is to destabilize the environment. So the constraints or the changes that we make are to kind of create a little bit of chaos. And I always like to say, as a coach, I'm comfortable in chaos, but chaos can scare people. And it kind of goes back to the beginning where I talked about immediate results versus long-term results. If you're looking for immediate results and somebody walks into my gym, like, it's going to look chaotic at times because, I'm creating an environment where the players are making decisions, the players are giving feedback. I don't know what's going to happen on every play, and that's okay. But you have to be comfortable, and it's going to take a long time because you have to teach out of that environment. And, it takes longer for the tactical knowledge to kind of develop. And so again, within this environment, you're trying to destabilize. So, whether we're putting them in a smaller space. So let's say we're doing 3-on-3, but we put them, inside the 3-point line. Well, now we've reduced the space. So now, that's going to kind of create some different, movement patterns. It's going to create some different decision-making, ideas, things that they couldn't do if they, there was more space. And so we've changed their environment and their kind of ability to coordinate and self-organize. So now they have to adapt. And so again, that kind of just goes back to, they're exploring, they're learning, okay, how do we now adapt in this new environment? And that's the overall goal. And, within that, there's, basically kind of 3 ways it's to kind of change and manipulate. You can manipulate through the task. So again, that being said, number of players, space available, whether or not they can dribble, the 1 second rule or half-second rule, things like that. How you can manipulate the task. You can manipulate the equipment. So I know, again, at the youth level especially, this is a big one, using a mini basket, using a smaller ball. I know in tennis they use, with USTA at the youth tennis, they use a smaller racket and a lower net and a smaller court. And then the last one is individual. So there's individual manipulations, and basically that we don't really have much control over that, just that every individual is unique. And so there are different sizes and strength and things like that. But again, the overall, results are that performance has been shown to improve The decision making and the creativity of the players has been shown to improve. Their ability to coordinate their movements has been shown to improve, and then they have more variability in their functional movements. And again, that's a little bit more individual specific, as opposed to being applied to team sports. But so here it is again, just kind of again goes back to the task, the environment, and the individual. So especially for, you know, basketball specific, I am all for, you know, smaller rims or smaller hoops, lighter, smaller ball. You know, we have to be able to, you know, allow players to be able to work with equipment that is more appropriate for their age, and their strength. And, you know, and it affords them the opportunity to have more learning opportunities and more movement opportunities. And it also, you know, a greater chance of success. And again, when they see success and they see, you know, enjoyment, then they're going to continue to pursue down that path of that sport. And that's what we ultimately want, is enjoyment and, you know, long-term development. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of start to move a little bit more into the more practical application and where do we go from here. I saw these different pictures, and coaches love cones. And don't get me wrong, I will use cones every once in a while for different things, but we like to, you know, all these pictures of cones and kids dribbling around cones, which is just, there's no function. And so this is not what we want. And again, Rob Gray made this point. He's like, if I was a kid and someone laid down a set of cones in front of me down the field and told me to get to the other end, I would just go in a straight line past them and get there as fast as I could. Which is exactly true. Again, we want to create an environment where they self-organize. So if I put a, you know, line of cones and want them to self-organize and tell them to, you know, get to the other end, why would I go around cones? I would just dribble straight to the other end. So again, it has to align. Our approach has to align with the environment that we're creating. So from here, I kind of want to move into more of small-sided games and what the advantages of using small-sided games are for development. So again, it gives players the opportunity for, you know, immediate coupling of their actions and information. So the tactical component, basically. You know, there's more opportunities for an unstable situation. So like we talked about, if we, you know, change the environment a little bit, it's going to be a little bit more unstable. And their ultimate goal is to, how do we get it back to stable? So again, this kind of goes back to neutral and advantages. You know, maybe we start out with an advantage small-sided game. So there's an unstable situation. There's an offensive advantage or a defensive advantage. And now how the players have to then regulate and self-organize. How do we get it back to neutral? How do we get it back to where we're, you know, not scrambling? And then it also increases interpersonal relations among players. They have to work together a little bit more. Again, going back with the holistic approach, that the coach is not providing constant feedback. You know, players aren't told exactly where to go and when, so they have to work together. It allows players, and especially at a younger age, to play every position. So, you know, if we're playing 3-on-3 or 2-on-2, like there's really no position, you know, again, because as we all know, you know, especially with young kids, like Johnny may be 4'8" and a point guard when he's 7, but he could grow and be, you know, 6 foot by the time he's 16, and he's probably still a point guard on the men's side, but, you know, he's playing a different position. So it's just, you know, this allows them to play, you know, all different positions. And, you know, we talk about positionless basketball kind of being the next wave, or this wave. So that creates that opportunity. And again, kind of the playing against defense constantly randomizes the drill and creates contested execution. and the most transferable to a real, a 5-on-5 game setting. And in the same way it affords offensive, decision making, it also affords defensive decision making. And again, small sided games allow multiple ball contacts, multiple decision making opportunities. In a 5-on-5 game, a player may touch the ball once on a possession. They may shoot the ball once every 5, 6, 7 possessions. Whereas in a small-sided game, they're going to touch the ball 3 or 4 times in a possession. They probably get to shoot a lot, once every other possession, maybe more. But it just creates more opportunities. And again, same with the decision making. You're going to be putting players in a defensive decision making context as well a lot more often. Creates more space. So again, at a younger age, this could be an advantage. There's more space for them to, use their skills and hopefully find success with their skills, especially dribbling, things like that. So that's another advantage for a small-sided game. And then it does create more teaching opportunities. As a coach, I think because of all of these things, when I'm doing, and, I've mostly coached at the college level, but, or professionally. But we do 80% small-sided games, because it allows more instances to come up, more scenarios to come up, and more opportunities for us to stop and teach, and learn, whether it's me giving feedback or whether it's them giving feedback to each other. So from here, we go into practice. Not all games and drills are created equal. I think that's the biggest thing I want to kind of talk about here is when we're creating this environment, when we're creating practice, we have to, again, coaches as architects, as environmental architects, what is our purpose for choosing a drill? Coaches will say, oh, I only have an hour and I couldn't get through everything. Why couldn't you get through everything you wanted to get through? Like, we need to plan and figure out what's most important. What are we doing? How are we coupling the skills? What do our players need? Because again, everybody's different. Our players may need, more of a traditional drill, scenario for half a practice at the beginning, or depending on the age, or you may have a really wide range of skill sets. And so you have to figure out how you're going to balance that. But there has to be an intent and purpose for choosing a drill. So for an analysis, like if somebody tells me that they need to work on passing and then tell me they're going to do a 3-man weave, I will probably question that. Nope, I will definitely question that. Because to me, three-man weave is not a passing drill. If your goal is to work on passing because you turn the ball over against defense, then a 3-man weave doesn't necessarily fill that skill. It doesn't work on that skill at all. It works on conditioning. It works on passing with no defense, but oftentimes there's a lot of traveling and things that aren't good. You don't really get very many passes in the drill. So for me, that's not the right answer. If you tell me you want to use it as a warm-up drill and just get the players moving and get a ball in their hands, then great. Use the 3-man weave, 5-man weave, perfect. But there has to be an intent and why we choose a drill. And that's going to maximize our practice time so that we use, whatever time we have most effectively. So again, kind of in that with the second one is what is the cost benefit of using that drill? Okay. So if I decide to use the 3-man weave as my warm-up drill or, get a moving conditioning drill, that's fine. But what am I sacrificing in that 10 minutes that I could have used somewhere else? And if you're cool with that, great, use it. But it's understanding that if you only have a certain amount of time or a certain amount of space, or, again, if we have 15 kids and we're doing 3-man weave, but we have 6 baskets, could we be using it, and so a 3-man weave, that means that 12 kids are standing on the baseline at one time. Like, can we be using the space more effectively for what we have time for, or in that day, and what we want to work on. And it's having an awareness. And then I know everybody, again, this is a game-based approach, but I'm going to say, and I like offense and defense and dynamic with everything, but on-air drills are okay sometimes. And I will, you just have to know why you're using them. Again, form shooting is fine. Like, I don't think there always has to be a defensive presence or a decision-making component with shooting, because some players need technical repetition of form shooting, and that's fine. But again, am I doing that with 15 people standing around watching one person shoot on one basket? Or am I doing it in an environment where I have, 2 players and we need to make some technical changes to their shot? And this is, we have 15 minutes to do it. So we're going to use that time where I can give more feedback. They can give me more feedback, so we can work together to make them more aware of what we're trying to accomplish with the technical change. But as long as you have a purpose with your on-air, and again, some teams, you may need to scale things back and do drill work, and that's fine. Just understand what your purpose is. So moving into games, and I don't have video. I'll preface it. I don't have video for these because every presentation I've done where I've tried to incorporate video, my internet freezes and it's bad. But I do have all of this info in a PDF and links to video of it. So I'm happy to share that with anybody that wants it. And I'll have all my contact info. So I'll just kind of talk it through. But I love tag games. So we're going into, so now we're talking about with youth especially, and even, I mean, we do these with our college, and I did with my professional team, like movement patterns and passing. And spatial awareness are kind of the 3 things I'm going to really focus on with the next part of the practical approach. So tag, and I came up with this, is teaching awareness through games. So tag games, and kids love tag. Everybody loves tag. I could probably play an hour of different tag games. I'm pretty sure I did in Denmark when I did youth clinics. Because I don't speak Danish, and we had to figure out a way to communicate. So we would just play tag in different ways. So RPS tag is rock, paper, scissors tag. So you just have players line up facing each other at, like, let's say half court, and they play rock, paper, scissors, so Rochambeau. And then they throw, and whoever wins, so if I throw and I win, then I am trying to get to the wall closest to me. So on my side of the court, I'm trying to get to that wall before my partner can tag me. So if you lose, you have to chase after your partner. So the winner has like a foot or 2 feet advantage. And they play, best out of 3, and then you rotate partners. But again, it's just a fun way. It's a good warm-up drill. Get some sprinting. They're running sprints. They don't even know they're running sprints. There's a cognitive component because they have to think, and then they have to think of who won. Then they have to think about which way they should be running. And then they have to actually sprint and run. So that's a fun one. And then, there's no ball or anything like that. And then Audi tag, it's a ball handling tag. So you start with a partner, everybody has a partner, everybody has a ball, and you start dribbling, and you can change the space based on number of people. So, keep them in a half court, and everybody has a partner, and your goal when you're dribbling is to tag your partner's knee. So I'm dribbling and I'm trying to touch my partner's knee. So again, it kind of gets them in a little bit lower stance. So closer to what we'd want is a more basketball stance because they're having to bend, but you're not telling them they're in a stance. You're just telling them they need to tag their partner's knee. And then the other person's trying to evade being tagged while trying to tag their knee. But it gets them a little bit lower. They're having to change hands and cross over, keep their dribble alive. And so they play best of 3. And then once somebody wins 2 out of 3, they immediately go find another partner. So again, that's another way, just kind of keep it fun. But you're not trying to knock a ball away. You're just trying to, get them in a low stance and tag somebody's knee. And then team tag. This one I used a lot. Again, used it with our older players. You can use it at every level. But you just have, one team on the baseline, one team in the half court with the ball. Everybody in the half court has a ball. On the baseline, usually just 1 or 2 people have a ball, and one person goes at a time. So you'll start with, and it's timed. So the game is timed. So coach will say, go, and the first person dribbles out and can tag anybody in the half court. And everybody in the half court has the ball, so they're dribbling, and you have to keep dribbling. If you stop dribbling, you're out. And so the first person goes, and they have to tag somebody. And as soon as they tag somebody, that person is out. They go off to the side, and they do, ball handling. And then the team that was on the baseline, the person that was dribbles back to the baseline. Once they cross baseline, the next person in line goes, they tag someone. So by the end, you have basically a one-on-one. And then you keep time. And so then you flip it, and then the other team goes, and whoever has the fastest time of getting everybody out wins. And this one's actually really interesting, especially with older players, because you'll see who goes after who. So like if your best ball handler goes after the weakest, is the first one in line and goes after the weakest person, it's kind of interesting to see where their competition and where their internal kind of confidence lies. Whereas if, they go after somebody who you would assume to be more of a comparable level of skill, and then, that makes it a little bit more challenging, then you kind of get a sense of where they're at. And then with this, we changed the movement pattern. So we'll do this just regular, running. We'll do it where both teams have to skip. So they'll have to be dribbling and skipping. We'll do it where they have to shuffle, so they can shuffle laterally and then forward and back. But basically with shuffle, the definition of a shuffle is your feet don't cross. So they shuffle laterally, but their feet can't cross, and they shuffle forward and backward, but their feet can't cross. And both teams have to do that. So again, you just change the movement pattern, but it's kind of fun. And then individual tag is just, again, with or without a ball. You can just play tag in the half court. You can play tag where they, have a ball and they're trying to, knock somebody's ball out. So again, just kind of, with that, you can change the movement patterns, doing skipping or shuffling. But just lots of different ways to teach kind of an awareness and simple basketball concepts through some games. And then kind of going into spatial awareness and some passing games that I like to use. And again, I put on the little clipboard, if your goal as a coach is to work on passing and spacing and spatial awareness, then the 3-man weave, the 5-man weave, 2-line, just chest pass across from each other, don't really teach those skills. So that's not what your practice should include. Your practice should include some of these. So Long Island passing is awesome. This was actually our game day shoot around warm up with my team, my Division II team, my college Division II team. We did this every game day. And basically you just have 2 teams. So you can have 3 if you want, but I keep it at 2. So let's say 6 on each team. And they're all, your boundaries are half court, and they're just passing to their own team. So no dribble, you're just passing to your own team, passing and moving. There's no defense, but obviously there's going to be another team that's passing to their team. And so players are going to be intermixed, and they have to have an awareness of somebody standing right next to them, and going to an open space. Again, no defense, but just a lot of people and a lot of people around. So this is a good one to start off, especially with young kids, with the spatial awareness and helping them understand, you know, if Johnny's on his team and he's passing and he's standing, you know, right next to me, maybe I should move 2 or 3 spots over so my teammate can pass to me in more space, but without defense. And then what we do to make it more challenging is we add basketballs. So then you add a second basketball to each team and a third basketball to each team. 3 basketballs, it gets chaotic and that's craziness, but that's the most I've ever done. And then I also add the half-second rule. So once you pass, you got to move within a half second. And then fill the spot. I actually got this from Kirby Shep in last year when we were up at Basketball Manitoba speaking. Basically just put down, you know, the little dots. So put down 4 little dots in different spots, and every player has a partner. So, you know, there's 2 people on each dot, and one's on offense with the ball, or one team has the ball, one team doesn't have the ball. And they just have to pass the ball to a teammate and then move to a new spot. So the offense and defense, they just pass and then cut to a new spot. And you can make the shape whatever you want. You can have the players make the shape. That might be kind of fun. But they just have to pass and move to a new spot. And again, you know, don't even do it necessarily at the basket. You can do it, you know, at half court or off to the side or wherever. It's just teaching them spatial awareness, you know, and kind of cutting and moving and getting used to passing and then moving and then, you know, cutting to a different spot. But they don't really realize they're cutting to a spot. They're just moving to a new dot. So just, again, kind of teaching that awareness. Advantage, and I'm trying to get through this kind of quickly, but I'm happy to, again, share all of the videos and instructions with this. But advantage passing is basically you have 5-on-5, so 2 teams, let's say 5-on-5, and then one person is all-time offense. So I'll have a red team and a black team, and then one person will have on a yellow jersey, and they're on both teams. So whichever team is on offense, the yellow jersey is always on offense, or is always on the team with the ball. So we have half court, and red team starts with the ball. So basically it's 6-on-5. So it's the red team plus the yellow jersey against the 5 black team, black jerseys. So we pass, you know, and they're trying to get 50 passes, that not necessarily in a row, just 50 total. And anytime there's a deflection or it goes out of bounds or a travel, then they immediately give it to the other team. And then the black jersey team becomes offense. So it's the black jersey team plus the yellow jersey against the red team. So it's always 6-on-5. And then they keep track. And so let's say they get to 20 passes before a turnover. Then the other team takes over. But when the black jersey team gets it again, they start at 20. They don't have to start over. Then they just try to get to 50. So again, just creating a small advantage. And you can make it a bigger. So you could have 2 people that are all-time offense. So you could have like 7-on-5 or, you know, whatever you want to do to, you know, make it a little bit easier depending on the age group and the number of players that you have. And then volleyball passing is a similar idea. You just have to, when there's it's 4-on-4 within the volleyball court, and then passing to complete 35 passes. But whenever somebody turns it over, that person has to immediately run a lap around the volleyball court before they can join back into their team. So for, you know, that 15 seconds it takes them to run around, one team has an advantage. So just kind of another way to do that. And then these are some of, again, the manipulation games that I like to use. So just go through a couple of these. And, you know, the diagrams are kind of small, but I have all these I can share. But this is 4-on-4 Canada rules because I got it from Mike McKay in Canada. And so it's one of our favorites, but it's a little bit more complex. So again, probably older players. But you basically break the court into 6 squares, the half court into 6 squares, and you play 4-on-4. But no 2 people can be in the same quadrant or the same square at the same time. So obviously there's no ball screens and no screens. And so the players have to try to learn and move and organize so that there's an open square for a player to drive or a player to cut, without cutting into the same square or driving into a square where there's already a player. So again, just kind of an advanced way to work on the spatial awareness, communication, again, using some manipulations to kind of try to get the players to self-organize. And then to make it even more advanced, I add the 1-second rule. But again, that's, I let them play it a couple times. And the first time you play it, it's going to be very slow, and they're going to be thinking a ton and trying to analyze where to go and what to do. But as they get the hang of it, again, you can add the 1-second rule, and kind of go from there. And they can't cut diagonally through a square. That doesn't count. So again, the goal, without telling them, is to create an open square as much as possible for players to attack and drive and penetrate. And then everybody else kind of spacing out and getting into the spacing concepts that we typically want in a 4-on-4 scenario. And then this one I kind of use for screening action, call it 2-on-2 screening. And so we just start, you can start any screening action. This just shows, the diagram shows a simple down screen, but you could do flare screen or back screen or whatever you want. But you have a passer, kind of the opposite lane line, and then offense and defense on the wing, offense and defense on the block. And then this is a good one when, your players are, 11, 12, you're starting to introduce more concepts with off-ball kind of stuff and off-ball screening. But they set the down screen, and then once the down screen is set, the person with the ball doesn't have a defender. You can eventually add a defender, but that adds complexity. So we want to try to keep it a little bit more simplified. But once the ball is entered, and you're trying to score off that screening action. So once it's entered, the offense only has one more pass to score. And then each person has their dribble, but they only have one pass. So they can't, play 2-on-2 forever trying to score. So you're trying to create an advantage off of that screening action, basically. And I let the defense do whatever they want defensively. They can switch, they can, chase, they can do whatever. I don't give them any instructions. But just kind of how that drill works. You want them trying to read screens and, really be effective trying to create an advantage tactically coming off that screen, either for themselves or for the screener. So it just kind of gets them thinking a little bit. And then if they score, each person gets a point, and then you kind of rotate. So everybody, offense, defense, so everybody goes with somebody different. It's not always the same people. And then my last one, this is one of my favorite ones. I got it from Brian McCormick. It's 3-on-3. We call it 3-on-3 Wildcat rules. And so basically the only rule with this one, and I start with no ball screens because I want them working on spacing and cutting. And so it's 3-on-3, just 3-on-3 live. So a small sided game, but the rules or the manipulations are, you have to catch the ball either on a direct cut to the basket that leads to a layup or outside the 3-point line. So every catch has to be one of those two things. They can dribble inside from the 3-point line into the key or to the basket or, into mid-range, but they can't catch the ball in mid-range. And when they make their cut, it has to lead right to a layup. A lot of times you'll find, players will make a cut and they'll, I was talking with a coach about this, they'll extend their cut and they'll turn a layup into like a 7-foot shot. And we don't really, like a 7-foot shot with our back to the basket isn't a good shot. We want a layup, and so that's the rule. And I don't give feedback during this one. In most of the small sided games, I don't give feedback until the end, then we'll debrief. And I'll ask them, their questions of what their, thoughts were, and then give feedback from there. But again, this is one of my favorites. We use it all the time at every level I've ever coached. And then you can also, again, add the 1 second rule if you want, or the half-second rule, or you can use ball screens if you'd like. I just typically don't, because of what my purpose is for the drill. So to sum it up, I'm going to wrap it up. What this kind of whole thing, what this approach is, it's not just playing games, okay, and asking questions, and, it's not just that, because that doesn't meet all of the holistic needs of our athletes or our kids. It's creating this environment where they get to explore their ideas. They get to try new movement patterns, try new coordinated, try to, stabilize the unstable environment, to work toward the goals that we want as a group. And as a coach, it is for us creating these scenarios that allow them to do that. And, at the more advanced level and the older they get, keeping in mind, competitive performance, and trying to also then create this internal motivation, again, because if they're self-directing, there's going to be a greater sense of ownership and, appreciation for what they're doing and pride in what they're doing. And so hopefully a longer lasting love for the game and enjoyment for what they're doing. But we're trying to create this, this environment through this approach and using games. And then again, research shows that the actions of coaches as possibly the most critical motivational influences within the sport setting. So again, at the end of the day, we're still that CEO, we're still that environmental architect. And so it's, on us to really create this environment where, through the whole approach and understanding why we use the games and why we're using them in practice and why we're using different drills in practice, and what, just continuing to evaluate, self-evaluate, and why and when we give feedback and how we do it is going to allow our players, hopefully, to continue to stay in sport and to continue to love sport and enjoy it, and move forward with it in their career. So I managed to fit it all in, which is amazing. I'm really excited. So hopefully, again, hopefully that helped, create a little bit different, ideology and, kind of a more theoretical approach to why we do games, rather than just us. I know there's a lot of info out there, people just doing games, but I kind of wanted people to understand what it means to do this approach, and why we want to put players in these positions, while also kind of how it's applicable and how I use it. And then there's all my contact information. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, my email. I try to put a lot of actual content on Twitter. It's probably my most professional way to connect with me. And then email. I'm always happy to email. And then usually if you email me, I'll give you my phone number and we'll have a conversation. So happy to share.
Amazing, Coach Finch.
I don't know if we have time. But if you want me to, I will.
Sure, I'm going to hit you with one just from our attendees. So I think it maybe ties into what you're talking about, but maybe a little bit out there as well. What's your opinion on playing in different leagues, clubs, schools, or federation all at the same time for young athletes?
Oh, I mean, I will say I think it depends on the athlete and the age and what their goals are and what their motivation is. The biggest thing is to be aware of burnout and fatigue, not only in the short term, but in the long term, because rest is essential. But, I do know, and it's going to be really interesting now with COVID on how things are going to transpire, because there is going to be a lot of overlap with, different leagues, different national teams, internationally, and then the US, with AAU and high school and things like that. So you know, I want to support it if the athlete it meets what their goals are and they're highly driven and they're highly motivated and that's, you know, the path they want to be on. But just to be aware of the fatigue factor and burnout and overdoing it. I don't think it's necessary, but if that's, you know, you also don't want to restrict them if that's what they want to do.
Awesome. Coach Finch, really appreciate the time sharing with us on the Global
Yeah.
Youth Basketball Summit. Coach Finch has been so kind to leave her contact information here. You can get in touch with her there, and we wish you all the best. I'm sure we'll be connecting real soon.
Thanks. Sounds good. And good luck to you as well.
Awesome. Take care now.
Thanks, everyone.